ink-a-dink, 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 ink-a-dink. Wow!
It's almost like we freeze-framed the end of the Friday night show, and we're back. No, I'm not Joseph. No, my name's not Joseph. You know me. I'm David. I'm your co-host. Basil looked at me kind of eerily and said, all I see, well, I see a red sign being waved around. Okay, hold on. But also, all I see beyond that is the name Joseph. Oh. You thought my name was Joseph City, comma, as? Wait, let's fix that. Okay. Hold on. Lilith is still there? Okay. She's still with us. In spirit only, but she's still with us. Okay. Hold on. I don't really know if this really goes with a t-shirt, but is that better? Can you see me now a little bit better? Basil said, said, at least I see a red bandana flying around somewhere next to me, and I hear that voice that I'm used to. Is that better? You see me a little bit better now? Well, first of all, there. Now at least you can. Okay, that's better. Okay, yeah. Let's see, Joseph City, Arizona. That's one of the spots Kristen and I stopped when we were on our third honeymoon tour. We went to, well, I call it Jackrabbit, Arizona, because it's got a jackrabbit on the logo, and it's on famous Route 66, and has a couple little gift stores that are pretty interesting, with memorabilia from when Route 66 was initiated, when it first became part of America's first highway system, back in the probably during the Depression, 1930s, late 30s, early 30s to late 30s, part of what was then the interstate highway system that we had, and later to be followed by the Eisenhower interstate system in the 1960s, late 50s into the 70s, and continuing on into today, with its construction, with loops around, beltways around major cities, so that you can have expansion of metropolitan areas, and people can still get into the metropolitan areas from the suburban areas. And who's to say one day we might see. Basil says, says, I already been there. I'm where I can see everything now. So, let me give you a little heads up. Before very long, people in cars are going to be in flying cars. Cars that can actually act as drones, if you will. And when there's a snarl on the highway, those cars that have that drone system involved with them can actually just fly up into the air, get past the, declutterify the highway a little bit, and get where they're going, and it adds a third dimension to the interstates, and it's coming. So prepare yourself for it. So we have these candidates on Friday night, and I see the back of one of them, and even from the back he looks like he's snarling or something. we were talking about two issues. One was being Bernie Sanders and the question, as was asked of Senator Obama back in 2008. The first question was, is he black enough? And the second question was, is he white enough? So as to try to skim away some of the connectivity that he had with voters. And it translates out this time around as to is Bernie Sanders, is Senator Sanders enough of a socialist? And the second question being, is he too much of a socialist? So in order to pull support away from different directions, you try to draw people away based on he's not like me, because the Republicans in their focus groups, they find out that the key phrase that people say that support Donald Trump for president amongst Republican primary voters is, he's a lot like me. I guess they mean that in a positive way. I imagine it seems like that's what they're actually meaning that they think they think they're good people and they think he's a good person. And Basil seems to think he's giving me he's winking and he's twisting two of the whiskers on the right side of his face counterclockwise. Now that's what cats call sign language. I mean, they don't have fingers. They really can't maneuver their paws in such a way to do sign language. They can box, but they can't seem to figure out a way of sign language using their paws. So they use their whiskers instead, and winking and flicking their ear. And Basil's very good at that. He's actually amongst the forefront of developing cat sign language, and his winking and rotating two whiskers in the right side of his face counterclockwise, I don't know what it means. I'm not sure what it means, but I'll get my cat sign language book out and start to brush up on that a little bit. So the second question was, the second thing that's being used as a way to try to and I don't think it's necessarily true that people supporting Hillary Clinton are behind this means of trying to separate Senator Sanders from Democratic primary voters on an issue that some people would say that they're united on, which they're not: guns. And that's why Basil asked me to expropriate this sign off a tree somewhere. Clearly in the state of Connecticut, because it says down here, state of Connecticut, Department of Environmental Protection. But this is about bow hunting. It says, this area open to bow hunting only, permit required, firearms prohibited. They're going to allow people to bow hunt in certain areas, and that's... and I think most people understand that hunting is, in fact, part of America's tradition. I mean, probably not just America's, but hunting is one of the key things that's involved in the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment also speaks to a militia. It allows states and municipalities to have a militia and not keep all the soldiers in the pocket of the federal government, which would give the federal government, to make it all powerful, so that you couldn't... if one group has all the weaponry, then it makes it a little hard to stand up to them. And the British, of course, had required that that only their soldiers were allowed to be the law enforcement arm of the colonial government. So we had guaranteed by the Second Amendment the right of states to have a state militia. It also by logic, allows local towns and municipalities and states to have police departments, to have law enforcement of their own, and it goes hand in hand with a guarantee by the Constitution that only allows military forces of the federal government to operate outside of the United States. They're not allowed to come in, except the National Guard can help out in disaster situations, and they're there not necessarily for law enforcement, but they're there to help deliver goods and services to people that are in disaster areas. And that's been under FEMA for a while, and that caused some problems for former President George W. Bush back in 2005 when New Orleans flooded and a lot of the Mississippi area flooded, and FEMA didn't know what to do. Federal Emergency Management did not know what to do to deliver, how to mobilize the National Guard and how to take care of a disaster under Homeland Security. There, got that correct. Now, FEMA was placed under Homeland Security, and Homeland Security didn't know how to mobilize FEMA resources properly, and so many people died, and a disaster just became a humongous disaster, and it reflected badly on President Bush. A picture of him flying in a helicopter up in the air, looking down at people that were in a lot of trouble, and as things do generally get blamed ultimately on the leader, President of the United States took a lot of flack for that along with the fact that he tried to use some of his capital from his political capital from his huge election win, where he almost got 51% of the vote. Used some political capital to try to privatize Social Security. That didn't go over too well either. So at that point, he sunk very quickly within the first 7 months of his second term. He sunk to about 35% of the polls and stayed pretty much there the remainder of his second term, which only got worse when the economy melted down in August of 2008 in the second term. So here we go. So we've got guns, and the fact that a lot of people don't realize is that in Bernie Sanders' first successful run for statewide office for House of Representatives, the National Rifle Association and Wayne LaPierre, who was head of the National Rifle Association at the time, got a little angry at their Republican member of the House. And Peter Smith, I think, was his name. Google it, correct us. They got mad at him, and they wanted to teach him a lesson because he had said something that was contrary to what they had told him to say. And they want to teach him a lesson by helping anybody beat him in the general election. So they spent some money. They sent out some postcards and flyers to voters that they thought they could influence, members of the NRA in Vermont. And they told them, do not vote for this guy. Vote for anybody. And the anybody ended up being Bernie Sanders running as a socialist. And the NRA encouraged people to vote for this socialist guy against the Republican Party incumbent. And son of a gun, well, he didn't just win by the tiny bit that the NRA votes helped swing, but he won by a pretty substantial margin over Peter Smith. He got in. He was elected to the House of Representatives from Vermont, and the NRA saw him as just a flash in the pan that they could get rid of the next time around. Well, next time around never happened. He was reelected and reelected and reelected. I believe he spent 4 terms in the House. Might have been 5. Again, Google it, tell us. But he spent a long time in the House of Representatives and only left in order to run for the United States Senate, where he won quite handily. and now he's serving in the Senate of the United States, and now running for president. So the word came out that, hey, this guy's on the side of the NRA. Doesn't make him very much of a progressive, does it? Makes him not exactly the kind of candidate that Democratic Party voters should vote for, since Democratic Party voters are more in favor of gun legislation and gun. It's called gun control, but in fact it's gun licensing and gun keeping track of guns and trying to make sure that people that would do bad things with guns don't get guns, and that if they get a hold of guns, they're not guns where you can kill 26 people in less than 3 minutes, like they did in the town next door, Newtown, Connecticut. So word went out that Bernie Sanders didn't deserve anybody's support in the Democratic primary because he doesn't think like a Democratic Party member, and But here's the thing: Bernie Sanders understands the issue of guns from a centrist point of view, and he understands it in a very clear way. He understands that in a state like Vermont, which is a state that's populated by a lot of hunters, it's a very rural, very, very wooded state. There's a lot of hunting goes on, and that's not killing people. Maybe it's killing animals, but as it were, a managed hunting system keeps deer population down, and Basil could go on and on about that. Huh? What? Said instead of you going on and on and on ad nauseum about it. Okay, I'll move along a little bit with that. So in a positive sense, or in a reality sense, there are two Americas in terms of guns. You have rural areas where guns are a normal part of life and people hunt, and there's urban areas and suburban areas where guns aren't used to hunt, except if you're considering hunting other human beings. So where on one hand guns are need to be accepted as part of American life in the rural areas, they need to be not accepted at all in a normal sense in areas where hunting doesn't go on. So Bernie Sanders understands that, and apparently other members of the Democratic Party don't seem to get it. So Bernie's got this notion that and he's voted true to his word on guns. He did oppose a mandatory background check, because he had told voters in Vermont that that's how he would vote, and he did. But he's been very clear about guns in cities, very clear about assault rifles being banned. He's voted as you would expect him to in all other cases. And there's a man that's true to his word. There's a man that understands the complexity of the issue. Very much like... Now, Basil's going to cut me off here in a second, I know. Oh, okay. Dean! Said, yeah, I know, but let me say this. He said, Basil says, you're going to talk about Howard Dean, and Howard Dean, as governor of Vermont, worked together with two very diverse groups, environmentalists and hunters, members of the National Rifle Association, worked together with them in a coalition fashion to set aside 8% of the land mass of Vermont as open space. Good for environmentalists, good for hunters. And that's coalition building, and that's where you have to recognize that if you can find common ground with people that you don't normally agree with, if you can do that and accomplish a positive goal, you do it. And Howard Dean at one point had a very favorable rating from the NRA. Then he decided to run for president. And all of a sudden the NRA decided, whoa, all that good stuff we said about Howard Dean, we're taking it back because we realize we're right-wing people, and he's apparently not a right-wing person in a lot of senses with a lot of other issues that we really are not our single focus. But so anyway, so people that understand that there are in fact different circumstances regarding gun ownership and gun usage that vary from state to state, and more importantly, from rural areas to urban areas, understand that Bernie Sanders has taken a very responsible tack on the issue of guns. And that's it. And, I did forget to say Blessed Sunday morning. This is Basil BuddhaCat Presents. I'm saying it now, okay? So you want to have more discussion with these... That's a good thing when they fell out of the clown car, they didn't scratch or mark our beautiful tabletop here, which, by the way, is granite, but it has some garnets in it. It's got some beautiful little flecks of garnet that quite often accompany granite, because granite is metamorphic rock. It's volcanic in nature, unlike pumice, which is... now, which candidate is this anyway? Because there's a little fleck of something whitish in here, like quartz, and a little fleck of something black in here. Or maybe it's a dark red. Might be flecks of. They might be flecks of garnet or ruby. Okay, so. How do these Republican candidates, and we know that this one is probably Jeb Bush because it's the biggest one, only to be outbigged, at least as far as area goes, flat area, by this one right here. And this is the candidate that everybody, now this one actually has, no, not this one, the other one. This one actually has some xylem on the outside. It's a branch of a tree or a small trunk, because it's got some xylem on the outside here, some xylem on the outside here. It's broken out in there, but it's petrified forest. And don't get worked up about us having petrified wood, because you could buy petrified wood anywhere outside the petrified forest. And how do they get it? How do they get it outside of the petrified forest? Where does it come from outside of the petrified forest? We don't know. But at any rate, so you can buy this stuff. Not that we did. But, so, these are 4 Republican candidates. This is some catnip from Friday night's show, and we got the kids up on the table for a second, sniffing that out, and then they decided that they are still camera shy. So Walter put in the 40-second work week and dusted a little bit, collected a couple seconds overtime, and then ran out. Oswald Cobblepot, brought in by Kristen for a moment. He marched around the table a little bit. He sleeked around the table, because we call him sleek or slick, because he looks kind of like he looks slick. He looks his coat is very polished and very, very smooth and flat and sleek. So, hold on. Donald Trump called in on Friday night, and he's still there. He wasn't on the Cat in the Hat phone because, Lil is still on that. Lilith Tail included free of charge, calling from the hereafter. And I hope she didn't reverse the charges, because that would be a bit expensive. The Nickelodeon phone for our second tier importance callers in. The Inky Dinky phone, which are typically for our callers in that don't really matter too very much anyway. And then there's the new, improved speck of an Inky Dinky phone that we have a call in from Donald Trump on. Now, Mr. Trump, you had mentioned on Friday night that you hadn't really said anything yet about Bernie Sanders. Do you have something to add about the candidacy of Bernie Sanders? Because in polling this week, when weighing presidential contenders from both the Democratic and the Republican Party, Bernie Sanders triumphs over, outpolls Jeb Bush by a slim margin, 48 to 47. He outpolls Scott Walker. Scott Walker. What? Trump says he liked our remark about Scott Walker being related to Jay Walker in terms of importance. Bernie Sanders outpolls Scott Walker by 7%. He outpolls some other guy by a little bit, and he outpolls Donald Trump by 20%. And what? I guess he hung up. Okay, Basil, I'll do it. Okay, Basil says he wants us to give Donald Trump the Senator Obama versus Senator McCain send off. Okay, there. Good. Okay. So we're not doing any commercials. Basil says he's.
They say they'd rob your grandma blind on Wall Street, fritter her away her Medicare on Wall Street. And Pharma Oil and their pet fox don't care if she lives in a box, so long as they wear platinum jocks on Wall Street, Meow.